All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Keith Owens. I'm here with Dr. Robert McTyre, and we are two of the founders of Detroit Stories Quarterly, also together with Cornelius Fortune. Will be with us hopefully next time. This is our very first, I guess I'll call it broadcast. We've been at it for a year now. Is that right, Doc? I think a year now. We've got 4 issues out. Detroit Stories Quarterly, and just by its name, we do it seasonally. So we've just released our spring edition. The summer edition should be coming out, I believe, in the end of July. That's what we're shooting for. And just give you a bit of background about us. We started this, I think it was actually Cornelius's idea to start. We start the magazine. We actually go back further than this because some of you may not know that, but Detroit Stories Quarterly, we actually started off as a writer's mastermind group close to 10 years ago. Has it been that long?
Yeah, at least.
Yeah, I think it's been about that. Yeah, and a writers mastermind group, and then from that point, then we evolved to the Detroit Inc. Publishing, and I was my wife Pamela was involved with that. And when we got involved in that, we got kind of be a bigger operation, and then from there, Cornelius had the idea that we should start a magazine, and so we toyed with the idea of doing it monthly or sometimes bi-weekly. We decided quarterly was the best, and that has definitely worked out to be the best for us. And essentially, Detroit Stories Quarterly, we picked up the title basically because we have a broad range of topics, but basically it's fiction. Everything, pretty much everything we have is fiction, alternative fiction, heavy emphasis on alternative fiction, but just regular fiction as well. Everything with the Detroit theme. Most of the authors are from Detroit, but they're not all the time. And the main thing we just hold the line on is that whatever the story is, it has to be anchored in Detroit some kind of a way. But the idea behind this Detroit Stories Quarterly is just to look at Detroit in all different kind of angles. And sometimes reality kind of keeps you limited in terms of what you can say. And sometimes fiction can tell the truth better than the truth can. And so we just kind of go at it and see where we turned up. I think the fun thing about fiction and science fiction is you don't always know where you're going till you get there. And so we just kind of follow it. Of course, we don't want to, everybody's aware of the things that have been going on recently with the COVID-19 and the unrest and protests recently. And obviously we're very aware of that as well. But we feel like stories, sometimes you wrestle with the fact, should we stop telling the stories, should we not? But I think that throughout history, the stories always get told. And we figure like stories are always there, and we continue through bad times and good. You can't just continue to tell the stories, and that's what we do, and tell them whichever way we can. And on that note, I think we're going to move forward. We have I wanted to kind of give a bit of intro. I think Doc, you mentioned we originally part of the reason we were late past edition, for those of you who've been following us for a while, is we had a few bit of publishing difficulties, and one of those was that we, understandably, things are a bit sensitive with the COVID-19, and in our previous edition, we had some COVID stuff that was in ours, and the publishing didn't really want us to do that, so that we had to kind of pull that out. But now that we're on our, so we did pull it out for publishing. But this is we control this space. this is DSQ. This is DSQ Live, and so we do whatever the hell we want to do on DSQ Live. Mm-hmm. So that's that. We've got we kept the statements that we had to take out. We're going to read them here, and before we start reading some of the book, some of the magazine rather. And at that, I think I'll let me okay. Let me start on my piece while I'm talking.
Well, Keith.
Go ahead, Doc.
Yeah, let me jump in real quick, and just to let everybody know, as Keith indicated, we're the founding members. I also want to clarify those that Keith serves as our guru, expert, marketing person. Cornelius, he really functions in kind of our designer role. These wonderful covers that you guys see, we give great honor to the great artistic thought that he has. He has aligned us with some good illustrators for that. And my role, I kind of serve a couple of, I'm the managing editor. I take on that role. We do have a wonderful copy editor who has done some great work. But I mentioned this also because, and Keith, I'm sure you noticed it, but I just want to clarify for those who are going to be looking for our book out there. You may see our current issue identified on the cover as the winter edition, and that kind of goes back to some of the back and forth that we had. And anyway, the cover that we do have there, although technically it's both winter and spring.
I think it says that, doesn't it?
Yeah, because we started. Well, I'm not sure. I know I've seen some versions that identify as winter, but just so people aren't confused, and as Keith says, our summer edition that's our next edition that will be coming out. But with that, Keith, if you want to,
yeah,
I had just a few words, but you go ahead first, and then I'll share mine, and
okay.
then I'll finish up reading Cornelius's.
Okay, yeah. Let me put this down here. All right. Okay. Can you see it there?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay.
Great.
All right. Every other day or so, I make a point of walking around the neighborhood for an hour, for exercise, to clear my head, to get some outside air. Almost no one is outside, which in itself is strange. We hardy few who take the occasional stroll already know to cross the street whenever we see another coming in the opposite direction. But then, almost without fail, we give each other the survivor's wave and a smile, just to acknowledge existence and to mutually agree that this is not personal, just survival. This is a dystopian reality taking shape around us. The surreal is becoming real before our very eyes. As an artist, it's hard to even fathom the sheer amount of creative material that will spring forth from this event. It truly is living history in a perversely exhilarating kind of way, kind of like war. We can read about wartime experiences all we want, or about slavery, but only those who were there will ever truly know. And as the artists, we can provide a service by contributing to the historical record, a perspective that no one else can. And there you have it. Doc, you there?
Yes, I'm here, and
Okay.
sorry about that. We're going to have to forgive a unintended interruption that might come in. My canines here, they get a little excited when they hear sounds outside. So I will mute as much as possible. But in any case, I just want everyone to know that I told Keith this, or maybe I didn't tell you this, but Carmela and I, my wife Carmela, we've been staying in shape during like everybody else, we go for walks in the morning and stuff like that. And I have my first experience, Keith, shortly after reading your piece. We were walking up the street, and somebody across the street, they nodded at me, and I nodded at them. And I said, Carmela, I just gave them Keith's the survivor nod. I thought that you coined that so well, Keith.
Oh, thank you.
That's exactly what.
Yeah.
It couldn't be said any better than that. So briefly, I had put together a piece indicating that we were just days from putting to bed this current edition as the pandemic was escalating. And for Detroit, it quickly became catastrophic, as all of us know, in depth and breadth. So we had delayed our publishing date, deciding to kind of look at a more appropriate time. But of course, we quickly learned that there would be no appropriate time. And so with that being said, and of course, it was implied in what you said, Keith, but we want to, just as the Detroit Stories Quarterly team, just formally say that our hearts go out to all who have lost people in the line of all of this. We in Detroit got hit very hard. I can personally, indicate there, I had some family members who struggled with this, had some students as well in my classes at Spring Arbor University who were also having to deal with this. So, we just continue to keep all of this situation in prayer, and this work that we're doing is representative of kind of that stick-to-itness and that powerful Detroit quality where we don't give up,
Absolutely.
So we go
Absolutely.
on and on. I'm going to see here. Let's see if I can. Okay. I'm not able to share my screen at the moment, Keith, but that's okay. I want to read Cornelius's piece.
Okay.
And I think you can give me the right to share screen if you.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. But I'll go ahead and read Cornelius's piece, and we'll move forward. And then when we come to the book reading, I'll be able to share.
Okay. Just a second. Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Try now.
Let's see. Oh, yep. Here it is. Okay. So what I'm bringing up, perfect. What I'm bringing up is, this is from Cornelius Fortune and the other part of our team. And he's going to have to forgive me if I stumble over that word down there that's italicized, but let me read it anyway. The devastation is real and we weren't prepared. Not for any of it. Not for the world to go from three-dimensional to funhouse mirror, cracked like lightning in 1,000 jagged places. The prescience stared into darkened crystal balls that held no image. The constellations gave no astrological comfort. Disruption has become, in this moment, a constant companion and uninvited guest who insists on staying despite all the hints dropped about the lateness of the hour and the need for rising early. This constant companion is a reflection of the times. We're seeing ourselves like a series of variant covers thematically linked. But Detroit's reflection is unaltered because, as always, it reflects resilience, persistence, fortitude, and an architecture of Rigandium proportions. We are built to last, even in the wake of devastation and metaphorical destruction. Science fiction, fantasy, and horror always tells us something of the times we are living in. Something about who we are in the face of technological advance, magical experience, and our deepest repressed fears. Cliches, however worn and undesirable in writing, have a deeply coded meaning beneath the surface. And so it's helpful to reach for a convenient one at this juncture. The world, including Detroit, will never be the same again. We know this without anyone telling us. We know that Detroiters will continue to tell their stories. And as living history, we will, as Faulkner put it, prevail. And again, that was from our other team member, Cornelius Fortune. Thank you, Keith.
Now you're going to do yours, right?
Actually, mine was kind of packaged into the introductory piece that I had just shared. So,
oh, okay.
Yep. That was part of that.
All right.
So let me give you a little bit of build up, my dear brother, because we are about to, and Keith is going to, certainly give your own perspective on your story before you get into it. But I just say. Keith Owens, who is also the author of Mayonnaise Murders, guys, those who you're listening here or watching it, and you're multitasking, you might want to Google that. That's an excellent book. He is one of our true premier science fiction authors within our community. And this story is so unique and it's downright creepy. If you hear a little Twilight Zone music in the background, and those who are too young to know what that is, you can Google that and listen to it and then come back. But if you hear some Twilight Zone music, it will be very appropriate as you read his story. But without further ado, Mr. Owens, if you would just tell us about the story you're going to share, give us the title and all of that, and I'm looking forward to hearing about it.
Well, thanks so much for the build-up. I really appreciate it. And I've got it here. Can you see Dread there?
Yes.
Okay. And yeah, this is funny because the idea behind Dread, and like, you know, we were talking earlier, and I said the fun thing about science fiction, actually just fiction, with me, is just that I don't know, you know, I don't know where I'm going until I get there. And you know, my wife recently wrote a piece. It was really great because I'm a planner married to a pantser. I mean, she plans her words, you know, and then she doesn't understand. I just, you know, jump in the water and swim, you know, and we neither one of us can figure the other out. It's like, I don't know how you plan a story. I just, you know, say, okay, I want to do something about dreads, and I think I'll just start here and we'll see where this goes. But I did know that the idea behind it to a degree is just that, and I think it's kind of, you know, apropos to times we're going through. I mean, just one of my favorite, I'm not a big into rap too much, but I love Public Enemy. And when I love their titles as well as their music. And one of my favorite albums as well as title was Fear of a Black Planet. And that just, you know, fear of blackness, period. And I think dread is the play on the words because the dreadlocks, and then it was also dread. And then that's what the story kind of taps into is just how that represents, you know, in a way, kind of like bebop in a sense. You know, bebop was done in jazz because they wanted to make a form of music that whites couldn't copy. You know, Little Richard got mad because they were stealing his stuff, and, you know, Chuck Berry, somebody runs off with it, and, you know, smooth jazz, but they couldn't get bebop. And so dreads, and they kind of like with, you know, dreads, it's like, you know, the true dread, you know, you pretty much have to be black to get the dreads right. You know,
Right.
You can tie your hair up, but, you know,
Yes.
the dreads are going to,
Yes.
you know, that's, and so, anyway, no further ado, that's what, you know, this is. And it's like, it's kind of strange. I don't know if I have time to read the whole thing. It's kind of long, but I'll read it for a while, and, you know, hope you enjoy it. And so every black person I know has seen this look from a white person interviewing them for a job at least once. It's a look that lets you know they're about to say some really dumb shit, and all you can do is smile about it. It's the look I'm getting right now. You know, that's a very interesting name. I mean, for a black person. I hope you don't mind my saying. Yeah, I get that a lot, mostly from white people though, if you don't mind my saying. I gave him my best "it's all good, bro" smile, thereby releasing the tension I already knew was starting to tie his stomach up in knots. Besides, he wasn't wrong. Not a whole lot of black folks named Jack Frost. Probably even fewer with a head full of dreads and cowrie shells hanging down their back like mine. Even here in Detroit, where pretty much the only folks who ain't black are the ones who just moved here. Like this perky little guy interviewing me for this magazine writing job. His name was Drake, which I thought was kind of hilarious because of the rapper with the same name. He returned my smile as confidently as he could. I think he was trying to match my "it's all good, bro," but it didn't quite work as planned. Drake looked like the geeky white guy in the Saturday Night Live skit who always laughs at the wrong things at the wrong times and just can't seem to get it. Drake was holding, no, caressing my resume in one hand in a perverse kind of way, like he knew he held a symbol for my life at this point in his hands, because I really did need this job. I know he was trying his best to be polite, but his smile really did irritate the fuck out of me. Have you tried anywhere else, he asked, his smile starting to look a little forced. Like where? The Free Press on the News had shut down a year ago, and the Metro Times is only selling ads and page stories these days. There weren't a whole lot of options for someone like myself who wanted to become a professional writer. I'd had some pretty decent success freelancing, selling pieces outside the city into some online zines. But freelancing is a hard way to go to make a decent living. This new magazine, D-Light, was the only place offering any full-time slots. I gave Drake one of my carefully curious, non-threatening looks. Eyes squinted just a touch, head cocked to the side. It was a look that said, "What in the hell are you talking about?" in such a way as to not push those hair-trigger white people buttons. Strange to have to walk on eggshells in what was still the blackest big city in America. But when they said this was the new Detroit, a whole lot of redefinition and recalculation came with that. Anyway, Drake wasn't too swift, so he didn't quite catch the meaning of my nonverbal response, swooped over his head like the last bird headed south. Hey, it's perfectly okay if you have, he said. I just was curious if we were your first choice. I mean, your writing samples are excellent. It's obvious to me that once you get some more experience under your belt, you could probably land a job anywhere you wanted. Seriously, any magazine would be lucky to have you once I get the experience. Yeah, I see. Drake nodded. Yeah, his smile was definitely starting to look a little bit strained. Right. Well, did you get a chance to read any of the clips I sent you? Or did you just kind of glance at them? Or, I mean, I'm only asking because I think I've written some pretty interesting stuff. The kind of stuff I think your audience will be interested in. Not that more experience isn't a good thing, but my copy is usually pretty clean. And I've already got a lot of good sources in here in the city. So I thought, I'm sorry, Mr. Frost. I just don't think we're ready to, what in the, oh my God, what is going on with your hair? Shit. I was so busy getting pissed at Geeky Guy that I wasn't paying attention to the dreads. I probably should have warned him, but it was too late now. The dreads had picked up on Drake's funky attitude throughout the interview, and they weren't having it. A few of them began to hiss, something I kept asking them not to do because I wasn't trying to be the Black Medusa. But the few ropes in back that had started to growl weren't helping matters much either. Still, since it was obvious I wasn't getting this job anyway, I figured it might be more fun to play ignorant and really fuck with the guy's head. So I gave him the black man frown. Dude, you got a problem with my hair? Seriously? You know you're in Detroit, right? Drake was already out of his chair and backing away. His eyes were big as a character from a Looney Tunes cartoon. And he was mumbling, something isn't, your hair, how can your hair be alive? This doesn't make any, oh my God, I have to go. Hold on, what? Drake, you telling me you ain't never seen a brother with dreadlocks before? You're telling me you're scared of locks, bro? I couldn't see myself in a mirror, but I could feel what the dreads were up to. I had a pretty good idea of what Drake was seeing before he turned and ran out of the interview room. The boy was quick, quicker than I would have imagined. Part 2, the schoolyard incident. My dreads weren't always so aggressive. Matter of fact, I didn't even know they were special until I was 7 years old. That was when the incident happened in school, and my parents had to sit me down and explain a few things to me about what to expect the rest of my life. I still remember the look on Mom's face when she came to pick me up at the principal's office. Mom was a short woman with a warm brown face. She rarely spoke unless she had to, but she always had an aura about her that let you know this was not a woman you wanted to fuck with unless you didn't care what happened next. But on that Friday morning at the principal's office, she looked more exhausted than anything else. I felt sorry for her because I knew somehow this was all my fault, even though I had no idea how I could have prevented it. I was as confused and terrified as everyone else, but then maybe not as scared as my teacher, Miss Kane, or Tommy. I remember Tommy couldn't stop screaming, even after Miss Kane started shaking him. When I walked over to say I was sorry, that I didn't know how it had happened, that it had never happened before, Miss Kane just yelled for me not to come any closer. You've done enough, you little freak, she screamed, making me stumble backward a few steps. As young as I was, I could hear more fear in that yell than anger. My own elementary school teacher was scared to death of me. Maybe I should have been proud of scaring her. I truly hated that woman. As for Tommy, I didn't even know Tommy's last name. I wasn't interested in knowing anything about him. He was short, fat, greasy, and specialized in being a bully. That was all I needed to know. Whenever we had recess on the playground, it was like Tommy got unleashed. None of the teachers ever paid any attention to what he did to the rest of us. They just let him run around and push, shove, and kick the rest of us to his fat little heart's delight. The one time I approached Miss Kane about Tommy's behavior, she looked down at me disapprovingly before she wagged her finger in my face, cautioning me not to be a tattletale. But Miss Kane, what did I tell you, Mr. Frost? And for a slow procession of weeks and months, that was how recess went, until that one day. It was late in the school year when you could feel winter starting to get restless, wanting to take its turn. A couple of my friends and I were seeing who could kick the ball backwards over our head the furthest. Just being able to do this had already set us apart as being recognizably cooler than some of the other kids, like Tommy. Anyway, I was busy focusing my concentration on kicking this white soccer ball so hard that it would wish no kid would ever kick it again. My friend James had just kicked the ball the farthest, and I was determined to outkick him if it was the last thing I did. None of us had been paying any attention to Tommy, because why would we? But Tommy was on his way to changing all that as his rotundness bore down on us like an angry bowling ball set on exploding a bunch of hapless pins. James tried to warn me about the oncoming train headed my way, but it was too late. Jack, look out. Huh? That was the last thing I said before Tommy suddenly appeared in the corner of my eye. I felt him crash into me, knocking the air out of my lungs and slamming my body into the dirt. As he landed on top of me, he started swinging at my head for no apparent reason, other than that he could. I drew myself up into a tight knot and started hollering for him to stop. For a while, it seemed like the beating would go on forever, until it didn't. First, there came a stinging sensation in my scalp that kept getting hotter. Then I heard the screaming, which sounded like it was coming from far, far away. What was such a big deal that could make Tommy stop swinging on me? The screams got louder in a rush, and somehow I knew they had something to do with me. I pulled my hands away from my face and opened my eyes real slow. That was when I saw Tommy, all covered in bloody tears. I couldn't make any sense of it, but he was all wrapped up in these thick black ropes, squeezing and tearing at him. He was writhing and kicking, his eyes all bugged out and wild. Looking back, I'm guessing it was denial. But at the time, I couldn't figure out the origin of those things that were squeezing him. My eyes found James again, but James turned and ran. And I mean, he was running away fast. Most of the other kids were running away too, or just stood there dumbstruck, staring at Tommy writhing on the ground. Miss Kane and the other teachers in the yard were trying to order the kids back inside the building, but this was hard for them to enforce. They seemed afraid to take their eyes off of me. Miss Kane pointed with one of those long, bone-white fingers of hers and commanded me to stop what I was doing to Tommy. She tried to keep her voice stern, but it was cracking and shrill. What did she mean, what I was doing to Tommy? Meanwhile, two of the black ropes had pried open Tommy's puckered little mouth and slithered down his throat. Several more had wrapped themselves around his body so tight that he couldn't move. Miss Kane was still shouting for me to stop hurting Tommy. But hadn't she seen what had happened? It was Tommy who had run across the playground to blindside me. It was Tommy who had knocked me over into the dirt and knocked the wind out of my lungs. Did she have any idea how much that hurt? Or did she just not care? As I felt my anger toward Miss Kane intensify, the ropes seemed to lose interest in Tommy, slowly unwrapping themselves from around him. The black hairy tentacles retracted from his throat, and he coughed and spluttered uncontrollably. They were refocusing their attention on Miss Kane. "Oh my God," she squeaked as she backed away. "What the hell are you?" And I think I'll leave it there. But
Man, oh man. Thank you, Sir Keith. Before we segue to me though, and I think if we manage our time, and you let me know because you're the webmaster here. Do we finish up right at the 3 o'clock hour, or do we have a little?
oh, we have leave. Like I said, like what you say about Twilight Zone. We control the vertical, the horizontal.
Oh God! Actually, Keith, and
Outer Limits. That was Outer Limits.
Oh man, I was gonna get you. All right, yes. Oh, that show scared me.
Yeah,
but
Outer Limits scared me.
Yeah, but I think you're a little more Twilight Zone simply because Rod Sterling he was that deep storyteller, you mimic his style a lot, I think. But I want to ask you a few questions, and just share some comments. And when I read mine, don't feel inclined to do so. If it comes up, that's fine. But it came to me, in reading your story, there were so many themes that emerged for me. I mean, obviously, the young black man who was in a bullying position.
Yeah.
I do some work in the K through 12 school system, and that description that you put on the playground, man, that's like so real.
Oh yeah.
For him to have gotten these strange powers, it actually it makes a lot of sense. I'm just wondering, the premise of this was a way to that the character would be protected, which is, and I don't want to give too much away of your story, but was that your intent when you wrote the story, is to kind of cast the character as kind of a typical kind of young Detroit boy who the parents were concerned that he might not be able to take care of himself? Because that is kind of the fundamental theme there, isn't it?
Yeah, that's what came. Like you said, like I said, when I started out, I didn't know. But but I mean, the thing with me is, when I write, the characters introduce themselves to me.
Really?
That's the thing, and so I never really, and so when I write, I don't know necessarily who they are till they start to talk. I always feel like I'm transcribing. It's like I know what they say, I just write it down. But the more I heard him talk, it's like that's what became apparent. When he got older, he was better able to take care of it. But he was somebody came from. But his parents, I mean, like I said, they were worried because and that and like I said, that schoolyard thing, I mean, comes from some personal experience. Are you there? Are you there, Doc?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yep. But as a kid growing up, I was like for years I was the only black kid in school, public school. So I had experiences of being. I was being, between about first grade, I was jumped at break every day. At lunchtime. I mean, I hated to go to lunch. Because the kids would come out, and I would just, and they pounce on me every single solitary day, and until I singled out who the bully was, and I waited behind and singled him out and get out of it, and then
that was your dreads, right?
Yeah, right. That was my dreads, and the word got around, and then I was okay. Right. I was okay, and then he and I became best friends, But it's like schoolyard stuff does, but
yes.
But that's where that kind of goes. But that's what that goes back to. Just that that whole thing of a kid who's kind of out of water and doesn't quite fit, and is just, came up that way and is kind of tired of it. And that's where it kind of gets that edgy sense of humor, I mean, of dealing with that way. So that's what, right.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just reinforce to all of our viewers and potential readers. And we've got some fans out there, people, shout out to my church, Abundant Life Christian Center. Quite a few people are buying the book from there. But we really do focus on themes that people can connect to. And as Keith is describing, his characters he's kind of a every young man kind of, growing up. I had that similar experience growing up too. And so, yeah, I definitely can relate to that. Any other final thoughts about your story, Keith? Before we move on?
No. That's fine. That's pretty much it. Yeah. So you're gonna read tests now? I mean, because that's.
Yes. In fact, I'm going in right now. Let's see here. Before I bring.
Because I should say, like I said, I mean, one thing I want to say before you get started too, and I mean, it may sound like a bad comparison, but I think it's great. I mean, I used to love that show Scooby-Doo, when I was a kid, and in some ways this reminds me, because I mean, it's like a kid's murder, mystery, and I think that kind of thing is what makes this story, I mean, so much, even the title, the case of the fried laptop, I mean, that is taken straight out of Saturday morning cartoons.
It is.
Straight out of Saturday morning cartoons, I mean, Detroit's Teen Titans of Tech, I mean, I love that, man. That's it.
I'm glad it was well received. I know that it's a little bit of a departure so far. I mean, we haven't done anything about really young people,
right,
per se, and so this was, and I do have to qualify. I did mention this to you guys when we had our story meeting, and it was just percolating in my head. TT and Tess is kind of a convergence of my boyhood interest in the Hardy Boys.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, got a couple of their books here, and
Oh man.
Yeah. But it was a kind of a combination of that, the Hardy Boys, the young detectives. That was one of the ways that I really learned to love reading, by reading various things like those books and comic books and all of that. But then the other piece, over the last, it's been now about 3.5 years, my wife and I have been, we've been part of the leadership team for an organization called Black Girls Code,
Oh
COD.
yeah, sure.
Yeah, and so, in fact, I've had, I've actually learned how to code. I've learned JavaScript and some of the other basic script methods, and have taught in some of the workshops. And then we had summer camp last year where I was the lead instructor, where we actually built an application from the ground up with using one of the Android development pieces. And as a result of that, I really started percolating with some thoughts and ideas about a particular story that could be developed as a result of that.
Okay.
So with that being said, and I'm just kind of hedging a little bit, I want to make sure that we don't get too much background noise. Keith, I need you to hold the fort for just 5 seconds here. I'll be right back.
Yeah, no problem at all. No problem at all. The wild dog is gone there. I think we'll talk about it. I mean, the thing about, like this is our first broadcast. I hope you're enjoying it so far. We're definitely having a great time. With McTyre, and like I said, next time Cornelius will be with us. And we also have, we're trying to have about one guest author per issue. This one we had two, Dr. John Telford and Abel Ramirez. And we're going to read a couple, some of their pieces as well. Oh, Doc's back. Okay.
Yeah.
And so I was trying to do my.
Yeah, this is the best way to keep it quiet. Right.
This is the latest team member. Okay. I'll turn it back over to you. Okay.
All right. So thank you so much, Keith. All right. So, hang on one second. Let me bring up my document again. It kind of got away from me. So, but yeah, so TT and Tess were basically kind of generated from that experience. And my thought was always that it would be a story that, well, I guess, as I have thought about it or considered it, that it would be a story that would be something of a little bit of a mystery, like you were saying, Keith.
Right.
All right, so my document is here, but it kind of went away. Let me come back in.
Okay.
All right. Having an unforeseen technical difficulty here. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Well, why don't you do this, Keith? Because I want to be sure that we kind of keep the flow going.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to
read Telford's piece?
Yeah, read Dr. Telford's piece, and,
okay.
And we can come back to me.
Okay. Let me pull it up. Here we go. Alrighty. Yeah, this story is I don't know if Dr. John Telford was a long time activist in Detroit, and also track star, somebody who actually had one point I believe held the world. I believe he had the world record in the 400 meter for a while, once upon a time. But he's a good friend of mine, also a renowned educator in Detroit. And like I said, know most of these days an educator and activist, but also very prominent activist. Very prominent athlete during his time when he was younger. And he submitted a story to us that I thought was great, that appropriately was about involving an athlete. I thought was very good, and but we all did. We wanted to include that. So the story is called The Last Race, and it's by John Telford, and I will start reading it to you now. Darnell Jones was of an indeterminate age. He could have been 35 or 50. He was dark-skinned and tall, with flecks of gray hair at his temples and in his thin mustache. Bending over his rake, he only half heard the teenage boy tackling behind him on the field. I chose Arizona State because they're giving me the best deal, man. I could have went to Michigan, Notre Dame, you name it. I almost went to Yale. They give tuition, books, room and board, and they're supposed to be a top school. But man, I just couldn't turn down that car. It was a late summer afternoon on a Friday, and some of the older men in the Detroit Recreation Department work crew chuckled with indulgent amusement. Billy, 10 years old is too damn young to be driving a car. You know that, said one. The chuckles exploded into full-throated laughter. Then you can come west and be my chauffeur this fall, Pops, countered Billy. Darnell Jones didn't join in when the laughing rose again, though he was attentive to the banter now. His big hands shoved the rake back and forth mechanically, his face expressionless. I broke the city 440 record, Billy boasted. It spanned 20-some years, and I broke it. Darnell turned and looked directly at Billy for the first time, noting the long body, the wide, powerful shoulders that belied the schoolboy fuzz on Billy's upper lip. What was your time, boy? Asked Darnell. Those 5 words were more than the crew was accustomed to hearing him speak at one time, and they stared at him in slight surprise. 48.6, Billy replied. If it is possible to swagger while standing in one place, Billy was doing it. How fast was the old record? Another man from the crew asked. He was younger, closer to Billy's age, and he had heard something of the high school sprint star's exploits. 48.8, I think, said Billy. I would have broke it by more, but nobody pushed me. Would you just listen to him, said the man Billy had called Pops. Darnell Jones had stopped listening. The rake in his hand stopped moving, and his gaze vacantly regarded the empty stands surrounding the running track and football field. For a moment, the stands seemed to bloom again with the blues, reds, and greens of spring jerseys, shirts, and dresses. Darnell, lifting his long legs into the stretch and driving for home, could hear the young girl screaming for him once more, his chest lunging mightily for the finish line, the exultant pain throbbing in his head. Flashbulbs and finish string snapped simultaneously as the stopwatches clicked his time. 48.8. Darnell, 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 chanted the stands across all those spring seasons. One season he married one of those young cheering girls, a girl with bright teeth and wonderful eyes. Since that time, he had lost one son and seen 2 daughters grow up and grow away. Although physically she remained his wife, too, although physically she had remained, his wife, too, had drifted away with his dreams for the future that had faded so long ago. At first, there had been coaches, always wheedling and promising. He'd accepted what he thought was the best offer of tuition, room and board, and a cafeteria job at the University of Michigan. But during his first varsity season, he pulled the hamstring muscle in his right thigh at a dual meet against Purdue. The coaches should have kept him out of the conference, but instead they shot the leg full of Novocaine and taped it up. Coasting, half limping, Darnell somehow made it to the 440 final. In the final 20 yards, he ripped the injured hamstring muscle out of its sheath behind the knee with a tissue-tearing sound loud enough for the runners behind him to hear. Darnell rolled in agony on the cinders as sharp spikes grazed him, skirted and hurdled him. When your leg heals in the fall, you can come on back. We'll take care of you, they said. His leg did not heal in the fall, and they did not take care of him. His athletic scholarship was rescinded. Then had come the wedding. He loved the girl, but the girl had loved the athlete. Still, she had stayed. It was the time of the Great Depression, and as Darnell and his growing family were forced to abandon apartment after apartment, his medals and newspaper clippings were gradually left behind, a few at a time, until they were all gone. Then followed a series of menial jobs until he wound up at the Detroit Recreation Department. Meanwhile, Billy was still bragging. So we're just into the stretch, see? Then I say to this brother from Pershing High, where you think you going, baby? Darnell shook his head slightly and opened his eyes wide. The stands he saw now stood colorless and starkly bald under the summer noonday sun. So he don't say nothing, but I can tell he's mad because he's pulling so hard his teeth shows. Later for him, I'm up and away in a cloud of dust. Billy linked action to word with a quick downward slash of his foot, scattering some dust near the curb of the track. As he grinned exuberantly at his audience, His gaze met Darnell's. The older man stared right through him. Seeing once again the home stretch, open and waiting, feeling again the good wind in his face, his foe was far behind. When I get to college, Billy predicted, I'm going to break the college record and the national record, and then I go after that world record. Again, he glanced impersonally in Darnell's direction. I'll lower the world record so low, won't nobody ever get close to it ever again. Then I'll go to the Olympics. I can beat you, boy, Darnell interrupted suddenly. For the second time that day, the men regarded him strangely. Ignoring their stares, Darnell reached into his wallet and pulled out a $10 bill. You're not as fast as you think you are. Put your money by your big mouth and I'll race you a lap around this track right now. And I think I'll leave it right there.
Yeah, that was, and I appreciate you stopping there, Keith, because we really want our readers to capture the intrigue that follows. Suffice it to say, though, that what follows, Dr. Telford's character, what he creates here is, it's both sad, but it's also, I don't know, it seems very timely. And I can't help but mention this, your last name is Owens, Keith, and, the great Jesse Owens was also the track master.
Right.
And so I couldn't help thinking a little bit about Jesse Owens in this kind of an alternate universe kind of Jesse.
Yep. We didn't get to that part, but it does get otherworldly. You can tell people that
very
much.
Very much so. All right. I guess in our wrap up, we may want to come back and make a few more comments about everyone's work. But without further ado, I think all my technical difficulties are taken care of here. So I'm going to get right into it. This is The Adventures of TT and Tess, Detroit's Teen Titans of Tech in the case of the fried laptop. Okay, so you all bear with me now. I probably will be a little bit over dramatic, but I'm trying to mimic what is it? They're between high school and middle school. So I'll try to mimic that as close as I can. Holy Moses, what have I done? The shriek which came from Mr. Finnegan across the hall wasn't just startling, it was downright scary. In the 1 year he had been teaching computer apps at Detroit Tech School for the Gifted and Talented, we never even heard him raise his voice. In fact, amongst ourselves, we called him Mr. Mouse again. And he actually kind of looked like a mouse too, but anyway. This had to be serious. I was the first to leap up from my laptop and run for the door. That important project I was working on for Aunt Miranda would have to wait. My little sister, Tess, short for Tesseract, yes, like the geometric concept, our parents were math majors, go figure, was right behind me, and our other classmates were behind her. Our teachers, Mr. and Mrs. Baylor, were slower to react. I heard Mrs. Baylor calling to me, TT, now just wait for us. Don't just go running. But I was already in the hallway by then and headed for the door of Mr. Finnegan's classroom. I had already calculated the cost of doing this, but as always, my curiosity and what mom and dad call my tendency to be downright impulsive sometimes, had gotten the best of me. The hallway was vacant, except for Mr. Wibbershaw, the janitor, who was pushing his floor cleaning machine at the far end. He was looking our way, and I could tell he had been startled too. It was past 4 o'clock. We had just begun our work in the afternoon code club. Today we had free time, which I was using to finish up my project for Aunt Miranda. As I entered the room, I saw Mr. Finnegan standing at his desk, looking down at his laptop. I followed his gaze and saw a coffee cup lying next to it. I knew, all of us knew, exactly what had happened. And an incredible coincidence, we had studied this classic problem just last week in a series of YouTube videos. Fried laptop, shouted Tess. Somehow she sped up and gotten past me. Though more than a head shorter than I was, my sister had the speed of a gazelle sometimes. We nudged Mr. Finnegan aside, and Tess, continuing to take the lead, disconnected the laptop. while muttering repeatedly, "Gotta get to the freezer, gotta get to a freezer." Mr. and Mrs. Baylor were trying to console the distraught Mr. Finnegan, assuring him, "They know what to do. We just covered this last week. There's still time." Their consolation did little good. In his normal, barely audible voice, he said again, "Holy Moses, what did I do?" Mr. Wilbershire was now standing in the doorway. Balmoral Gerio, my current crush, we call him Bal, asked quickly, "Mr. Wilbershire, can you unlock the kitchen? We need to get this laptop to a freezer." A freezer? The next thing I knew, we were running down the hall toward the cafeteria with Tess in the lead, clutching the laptop. As we passed the main office, we could see the principal, Dr. Kinsella, looking out from her office over her designer reading glasses. She would surely be right behind us in a moment. We reached the door to the cafeteria and waited for an out-of-breath Mr. Wilbershire, who was heavily grayed and in his second retirement job, to catch up. Pulling a set of keys from his pocket, he unlocked the door and Tess sprinted to the closest fridge. Seeing that a person of my height was needed to reach the upper freezer, I smiled smugly at my sister. Swooping in to snatch the laptop from her, I deftly placed the laptop atop some frozen peas and quickly slammed the door. I knew I would pay for my smugness later. Tess was glaring at me with that look she always has when I've bested her in something. In the meantime, everyone admitted a collective sigh of relief. We'd accomplished the most important step in rescuing a fried laptop. First, stop the frying by placing it in extreme cold. But had we done it in time, we would find out in about 30 minutes, the recommended time for taking the laptop out of the freezer. When we turned around, we were greeted with a peculiar combination of facial expressions from the adults standing in the doorway. Our teachers were beaming with pride, but Dr. Kinsella, not so much. She was a stickler for the rules, and we had committed the cardinal sin of running in the hallway. Never mind that we were on a mission of mercy to save a dying laptop. But where was Mr. Finnegan? I thought he had been following us. What was that about? Where did he go? Before I could think any more about it, Dr. Kinsella began speaking in her trademark sweet and deadly intonations, with perfect pitch and delivery. "Young ladies and young gentlemen of Detroit Tech's most esteemed Code Club, what crisis is so urgent that it has made you break one of the most important rules? Fried laptop," said Tess dramatically. "It was a matter of life and death, Dr. Kinsella. It had to get to a freezer immediately." Tessie, as I sometimes called her, accompanied her explanation with a smile that could melt the hardest of hearts. Yeah, my little sis was cute. I'll give her that. Other classmates added to the explanation and other teachers joined in. They told Dr. Kinsella about the emergency method we'd learned, freezing as a way to stop damage from liquid that had gotten into a laptop's keyboard. As the discussions continued, Mr. Finnegan appeared in the doorway, as if he'd just beamed there. He seemed less stressed, which to me meant something wasn't right. But then, anyway, Dr. Kinsella was offering words of consolation and assurance. A few of us looked at each other and made silent gagging motions at her uncharacteristic display of affection. We all knew Dr. Kinsella had a huge crush on Mr. Finnegan, which explained the sudden change in her mood. I used the moment to sneak out through a door in the kitchen just to my right. I knew the class would hang there for the magical 30 minutes it would take for the laptop to reboot. Meanwhile, I could get back to my project. My goal was to email it to Aunt Miranda before we finished at 6. And I'm going to leave it there. I don't want to give too much away. It is a mystery story. And Keith, I haven't written many mystery stories, and I guess it's only because I haven't really found characters that I enjoy, building a mystery story around.
Right.
T and Tess, they just kind of like the way they kind of came out of thin air. I was actually at one of the workshops one afternoon, and we were in between breaks, and I was looking because the TT and Tess are models from our girls and our Black Girls Code workshop.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, there were two girls in particular, and they were so brilliant. They had put together, they had developed their project. In fact, they did the presentation later that day. But the thought just emerged to me. They weren't sisters, but they could have been, and it was from that these characters started to emerge in my head, and of course from there the story moves on. One other concluding statement I want to make too: the character Aunt Miranda she actually is going to carry a lot in the story as far as
Yeah.
Titi and Tess are going to, there's other adventures they've got coming up, but the aunt, she's like this very powerful lobbyist for the tech industry, an African American woman, and she draws upon Titi, who's the oldest, she's a little bit more of the tech genius than Tess is.
Mm-hmm.
To actually, there's a code that TT has developed that can actually debug things real quickly, and her aunt actually hires her to help her do that. And of course, that's where our story picks up from there, and the story will be continued in our summer edition.
Right.
So that's also a little breaking new ground too. This is our first continuing story, or it's continuing series.
The first serial, that's right.
Yeah, serial. Thank you. Yep. So, well, anyway,
we're moving. Don't forget Abel. We're moving to get Abel's piece.
Absolutely. So Abel Ramirez, his piece, and I think I should be able to bring it right up. Abel, and you see my screen, okay, Keith? Everything's fine?
Yeah, I don't see the piece yet.
You don't see it? Okay, let me come back then. Try it again.
There you go. Okay.
All right, excellent.
Yeah.
All right, so real quick background on this piece, and of course, Keith gave a little bit of background in our introduction. Abel, and he would have loved to have been here today, was not able to make it to read it himself, so he entrusted me to read it. Suffice it to say, this is just a wonderful opportunity to share work that's specific to Southwest Detroit. Our Latino Hispanic community represented. Very early on, we had a piece that was kind of it was a play that was from that perspective. But now this is actually a piece from an author who has developed a very surreal, very Keith Owenish kind of Twilight Zone-ish. This is probably a little bit more Outer Limits, though.
You took the words out of my mouth. I was really gonna come in and say, so you talk about my Twilight Zone. This is definitely Outer Limits.
Yes, Outer Limits.
Because this will chill you.
Yes, it will. And I want to get to some of the good parts, so be patient with me. I do. It's with that. Setting the stage, we've got these two characters and who will start out, and they are in Southwest Detroit. And the title of this work is The One. And with that, we will get started. Marcus and Shane loaded the used baseball equipment into the trunk of Marcus's dark blue Ford Thunderbird. Leaning against the car, Marcus's girlfriend, Lisa, waited with him with her arms folded for them to load the trunk so that Shane could climb into the back seat with Jose. They hadn't played a game of softball together since middle school. College life had been keeping them busy, but it was time to take a well-deserved break. When Marcus and his gang rolled up to the high school's baseball diamond, Josh's group hadn't arrived yet. Josh was supposed to meet them there, bringing the rest of the players pooled in his van. Well, the field was already being used by some teenagers, and there wasn't any room to form a new game. Know of anywhere else we could play? Lisa asked Marcus. We could try my old middle school's playground, Marcus replied. It's big enough. Let's swing by to see if it's empty. Marcus drove as he spoke with Josh on his cell phone, informing him of the change of plans. Josh agreed to meet them at the new location. Owen Junior High School was out of the way, but Marcus figured it would be nice to see the old neighborhood again. He wanted to catch a glimpse of the plot where his childhood house had once stood across the street from the playground. He hadn't been in that part of the city in years. To get there, Marcus would have to drive underneath the aging overpass next to the now dilapidated train station. Back in the 50s, the station had been busy with the hustle and bustle of travelers taking the Amtrak train from Detroit to other parts of the country. But there had been many accidents, forcing the station to close in the early 70s. One especially tragic collision had taken place atop this very railway bridge, killing more than 70 passengers. The tracks were rumored to be cursed. The Thunderbird entered the shadowy underpass of the viaduct. There were no lights under the bridge, and the street was riddled with deep potholes. So Marcus slowed down as a precaution. "I don't like the dark," said Jose softly. "Oh, we'll be fine," Lisa said. "We'll be out from under here in a minute." Jose was the only one of the four not attending the University of Michigan. He was a large, big-boned guy, kind-hearted, but a little slow. Marcus, Lisa, and Shane were his best friends. They never made fun of him when he was a kid, and they knew he could play a hell of a game of softball. He was strong and could knock a ball into next week. They could see the light of day at the end of the tunnel, though it did not appear as bright as it had been before they entered. When the car emerged from underneath the bridge, the world seemed almost drab. The sky was dreary and gray, the buildings dim and nearly colorless. The grass and the leaves on the trees were lackluster, like faded dye in a once vibrant garment. Marcus drove on, turning down side street after side street until they approached the old middle school. The school building looked almost the same to Marcus, but he did not remember quite such a gloomy facade. Memories flooded back, and he felt like a little boy again. Marcus parked directly across from the empty playground, right in front of the spot where his childhood home once stood. Now, it was just a vacant lot with a dismal houses on either side, like a lower jaw missing a tooth. Marcus, Lisa, Jose, and Shane each carried a piece of equipment across the street to the grassless field. There were no bases on the playground, so they used whatever they could find. A couple of old red bricks would suffice as home and first base. A faded, used baseball mitt served as second, and an old folded newspaper with a rock paper weight would do for third. The group warmed up as they waited for Josh and his crew to arrive. Shane and Jose played catch while Marcus practiced his swing and Lisa pitched. Then Marcus's cell phone vibrated in his front pocket, interrupting practice. It was Josh. Marcus answered, still holding the bat in one hand. "Hello? Where are you, Mark?" "We're at the old playground." There was a long pause. "Owen Junior High's playground?" "Yeah, where are you guys?" "We're at the playground. I don't see you." "Josh, we're right in the middle of the field," Marcus said, looking around. "We set up bases and everything. We're warming up." "In the middle of the field? Are you at the playground at the corner of 15th and Ash?" Marcus looked for street signs on the corner. "Yep," he replied. "Well, we're right here and we don't see you." Marcus saw no one. Not a living soul was present, except for his friends. The streets were empty. There were no pedestrians, no cars, not even a bird or a squirrel was in sight. Maybe there was another 15th and Ash somewhere in the city. He scanned the area again and saw something that wasn't there before. His old house. Staring at the two-story home, Marcus hung up the phone without a word. His old house was there, just as he remembered, painted light green with white trim and a white wraparound porch to match. Marcus put the phone in his pocket and walked in silence toward the chain-link fence. "What's wrong, Mark?" asked Lisa. Marcus said nothing. Jose and Shane dropped the mitts and softball. They all saw now what Marcus was looking at, and they joined him at the chain link fence. Everyone gazed silently at the house. That house wasn't there before, Jose said slowly. No, it wasn't, said Marcus. It had to be, Shane insisted. We just didn't notice it. No, Lisa said, it wasn't. I would have noticed a house with a wraparound porch like that. It had to have been there. Houses don't just appear out by themselves, said Shane. My house burned down 15 years ago, said Marcus, his eyes fixed on the building. I know because it was my fault. I was playing with matches in bed when I was 10. Both of his hands were gripping the fence. It's not supposed to be there. Just then the sound of a door opening got the group's attention, and out of Marcus's home walked a woman carrying a broom in her hand. She had long, dark brown hair, and she was wearing glasses. She began to sweep the porch, seemingly oblivious to the small crowd staring at her from across the street. Mom? Breathed Marcus. That cannot be your mom, said Lisa. It looks like your mom, said Jose. It does look like your mom, Mark, said Shane, 15 years younger and 20 pounds lighter. We took a wrong turn somewhere, Marcus said nervously. I think it's time to go home. This has got to be a joke, Shane said. Joke or no joke, let's just get out of here, said Lisa. Forgetting all about the sports equipment and ready to leave, they left toward the playground entrance. Standing just outside the fence and blocking the exit was a group of 8 or 9 children between 9 and 12 years old. They had on clothes that were dim shades of brown and gray, and each of them was disfigured in some way, with sour expressions. Bald patches of skin where hair had fallen out were visible on grotesquely deformed heads. They stared at the quartet with lifeless eyes. All right, I'm going to leave it there because Abel would certainly want the readers to catch the final part of this. Suffice it to say, it does not get better in terms of their situation going on in that playground. Man, maximum creepy.
Oh, yeah.
I have to tell you, I had a conversation before, as we were in the final stage of putting this together. I had a conversation with Carmela, and I asked her, I said, you think I need to talk to the guys about my concern about this story? And she said, well, what are your concerns? I said, this is the first time that we've had something that has such a level of horror in it. I said, Keith's stuff has that kind of, and I said, that Twilight Zone-ish kind of classic Gothic scary stuff. There's a horror element in this, and we talked about it a little bit. But what happened, Keith, and it was interesting. As I stepped back, I slept on it, and I got the next day, I come back and I looked at the stories we had in this edition, and in a unique kind of way, all of us have themes that deal with young people in various stages, of challenging situations. And I said, wow, hey, we need to just let it stand as it is. I mean, and it does vary. Each story has its own unique perspective. And so
I love horror. I've always loved horror. Yeah, I think have our own horror piece. I'm going to hopefully next year try something like that myself. But it was like you said, it definitely does not get better. It gets but yeah, you start reading it, it's like, whoa, this the thing. So yes, but I guess we're about to we've gone a little over, but that's okay. Hopefully everybody enjoyed as much as we do. We do.
Yes, indeed. Absolutely.
But yeah, we just like I said, stay tuned for folks. Like I said, we're going to be, even though the magazine's quarterly, we're going to be doing this more often in the future, having more readings and also hopefully some interview with some of the guest authors and other authors, and open it up, and we'll see what else we do. But I think we're going to be trying to. Like I said, we've been here for a year, so we're looking forward to taking it to the next level and just continue to tell more Detroit stories moving forward. And hope you like what you hear, hope you like what you read, and stick with us. We got places to go. So, anything else you want to add, Doc?
No, other than we just appreciate the support that we've gotten thus
Absolutely.
far. Hang in there. We got some exciting stuff. Our summer edition is going to be the best is yet to come. So please continue to hang with us, and we thank you for the support.
Absolutely. All
All right.
right. Thank you. We'll see you later. See everybody
All right.
later.
Thanks, Keith.
Yep. Thank you too.